Under the glowing lights of the America's Got Talent stage, 23-year-old Lian Ramirez from Cebu City walked forward with slow, cautious steps, as if each foot carried the weight of every struggle she had survived. The massive theater hummed with anticipation, the audience whispering softly as they tried to guess what kind of performance the petite Filipina would deliver. Lian tightened her grip on the microphone, her hands trembling, not from fear alone, but from the overwhelming realization that she was thousands of miles away from the narrow streets where her dreams first began. She breathed in deeply, remembering the scent of early morning sea breeze in Cebu, the sound of jeepneys roaring past Colon Street, and the gentle voice of her mother waking her before sunrise to help prepare the flowers they sold near the bustling Carbon Market. For years, she had stood on busy corners humming melodies while buyers rushed past, some noticing her, many not. But every soft coin dropped into her tin can gave her hope. Every person who paused to listen reminded her that her voice, though unheard by the world, mattered somewhere. Standing now in front of Simon Cowell, Heidi Klum, Howie Mandel, and Sofia Vergara, she felt the weight of her past meeting the possibility of her future. Simon watched her with a familiar sharpness, but his eyes softened for a moment when he noticed her trembling hands. He leaned forward slightly, sensing a story behind her fragile smile. When Howie asked where she was from, Lian's voice cracked softly as she answered, "I'm from Cebu City, Philippines." A wave of cheers erupted from Filipino audience members seated around the theater, waving tiny flags, shouting, "Mabuhay!" and "Cebuana represent." Their support made her chest tighten with emotion. She continued, explaining how she grew up singing beside her mother's flower stand, how music became the only place where her fears could rest, and her dreams could breathe. She told them that her father left when she was young, that her mother worked endlessly to keep their small rented room, and that singing was her way of helping them survive. The judges listened intently. Even the audience, thousands strong, fell into a rare silence. Lian took another breath, this one deeper, braver. "I came here," she said, her voice steadying, "not just to win. I came here because I want to show the world that a girl who once sang in the streets of Cebu can stand on a stage like this. I want to make my mom proud, and I want to prove that dreams from small places can still grow big." The crowd murmured in admiration. A few people in the front row wiped tears. Backstage, a producer whispered to another, "I think we've got something special here." Simon exchanged a brief glance with Heidi, something unspoken passing between them, an instinct, a recognition. He leaned closer to his microphone and said quietly, "Take your time. Whenever you're ready." Those words, simple but sincere, settled into Lian's heart like a promise. She lifted the microphone with both hands, feeling her entire journey, every hardship, every song sung in crowded markets, every night wondering if her dreams were too big, merge into a single moment. The lights dimmed slightly. The room stilled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't singing for coins, or for passing strangers. She wasn't singing to survive. She was singing to be seen. She was singing to finally be heard. And as she closed her eyes, preparing for the first note, she realized she had already won something far greater than a trophy. She had finally stepped onto the stage her younger self had only dared to imagine. The moment the music began, a soft hush rippled across the AGT theater, settling over the thousands of people watching. A single spotlight warmed Lian Ramirez's face, reflecting the shimmer of tears that had gathered but not yet fallen. She kept her eyes closed for the first few seconds, grounding herself in the familiar rhythm of her heartbeat, letting it guide her into the song she had carried for years like a secret prayer. It was an opium-inspired ballad she had rewritten in English just for this audition, a melody built with the echoes of Cebu's streets and the pain of longing that had shaped her life. When Lien opened her eyes and released her first note, it floated through the auditorium like a fragile feather, and instantly everything stopped. The audience froze in their seats, conversations died mid-whisper, and even the judges leaned in as if pulled by an invisible thread. Her voice was soft but powerful, raw but controlled, trembling with emotion yet anchored by something deep inside her. It wasn't just singing, it was confession, memory, courage, and heartbreak merging into one beautiful wave. As she continued, her voice climbed and dipped with poetic precision, carrying a story of a young girl who sang between market stalls, who dreamed between long nights of helping her mother count their earnings, who believed that music could be her bridge to something bigger. Every lyric was a piece of her soul. Every note felt like it had been carved from her wounds and polished by hope. Heidi Klum pressed one hand to her heart. Sofia Vergara leaned forward, eyes wide, as if trying to decipher how such a small, quiet Filipina could possess such an enormous emotional range. Howie Mandel whispered to Simon, "This is one of those auditions." But even he couldn't finish the sentence. The room was too sacred, too full of unspoken awe. Simon Cowell did not blink. He watched Lien with a look that mixed curiosity, disbelief, and admiration. There was something in her tone, an honesty that could not be manufactured, a purity that no training could produce. As she reached a delicate high note, Simon's eyebrows lifted slightly, the kind of reaction he rarely showed unless he knew he was witnessing someone extraordinary. It wasn't just her talent, it was the weight of her story carried in every breath. Backstage, the crew had stopped working. Camera operators, stagehands, even producers paused to listen. One of them whispered, "I've never heard anything like this. She's giving everything." Another responded, "She's singing like her life depends on it." And in a way, it did. This performance was her chance to rewrite every hardship she had endured. Midway through the song, the audience began to sway. Some wiped tears silently, others pressed hands over their mouths. A group of Filipinos near the back held small blue and red flags to their chests, whispering, "Laban, Lien, go girl, Kai Mo Yen." Their voices were soft, but she could almost feel them lifting her higher. When Lien approached the final note, she drew a long breath that seemed to gather every moment of pain and hope she had lived. The note burst from her like a release, crystal, powerful, trembling with victory. It echoed through the theater, rising above the lights, the silence, the expectations, and settling into something unforgettable. The instant the last note faded, the crowd exploded into applause. People leapt to their feet, shouting, crying, cheering her name. Heidi stood first, clapping above her head. Sophia covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Howie nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. And Simon remained seated for a moment longer, staring at Lien with the stunned expression of someone who had just witnessed a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he stood up, joining the standing ovation. Lien covered her trembling lips with both hands, realizing she had just changed her life in front of the world. The applause was still shaking the walls of the AGT theater when Lien Ramirez lowered her trembling hands from her face. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, overwhelmed by the roar of thousands of people chanting her name, waving flags of the Philippines, and cheering as though they had just witnessed a miracle. She felt her knees weaken, but the energy of the room held her upright like invisible arms lifting her toward a dream she had chased since childhood. Slowly, the applause softened, not because the audience was any less amazed, but because they were waiting, almost breathless, to hear what the judges would say. The room fell into a stillness that felt almost unreal. Simon Cowell, who had remained silent longer than usual, continued looking at Lien with an expression she had rarely seen on his face, something gentle, something deeply moved. He exhaled softly, stepped forward, and leaned into his microphone. "Lien," he began, his voice lower than the audience expected. "There are performances, and then there are moments. What you created here tonight wasn't just singing. It was a moment that none of us are going to forget." Lien felt her vision blur again as tears pushed to the surface. She clutched the microphone tighter, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. Simon continued, "I could feel every single word you sang. It was honest. It was brave. And it came from somewhere real. Not every artist can do that. Only a few." He paused, letting his words settle deep into the theater. Sofia Vergara nodded vigorously and added, "You made all of us feel your story, your heart, your life. You're tiny, but your voice filled this whole room like magic." The audience cheered loudly in agreement. Heidi Klum leaned forward and said, "You didn't just hit notes, you touched people. You made us forget we were watching a show. It felt like we were watching someone's soul open up right in front of us." Howie Mandel chimed in softly, almost whispering, "When someone sings from that place, it changes more than the stage. It changes people." Lien covered her mouth again, stunned by their words. She had dreamed of comments like these, prayed for them, imagined them late at night while rehearing songs in her small Cebu bedroom, but hearing them now felt unreal, like stepping inside her own fantasy. Simon raised his hand gently to quiet the judges. "Before I vote," he said, "I want to say one more thing." The room leaned in. Backstage, crew members stopped moving again. Even the cameras seemed to pause. "You said earlier that you wanted to show the world what a girl from Cebu can do," Simon said. "Well, you didn't just show the world. You reminded the world why talent has no nationality, no boundaries, no limits." A long wave of cheers filled the air. "And tonight," Simon added, his voice softening even further, "you broke barriers. You broke expectations. You broke the silence in this room. And you broke my heart in the best possible way." Lien let out a quiet sob, unable to contain the emotion any longer. Simon looked down at his button for a brief second, then back at her with a smile that felt rare, warm, and sincere. "My answer," he said, pressing the button with a firm hand, "is an absolute yes." The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Howie followed instantly. "Yes!" Heidi clapped and shouted, "1,000% yes!" Sofia beamed, "It's a huge yes for me." All four judges, unanimous. Lien fell to her knees, overwhelmed, as the entire AGT theater stood again, chanting her name, celebrating a moment that would now belong to AGT history. In that single breath, she realized she had done more than perform. She had changed her life. She had honored Cebu. She had made her mother proud. And she had shown the world what a Filipina dream could sound like.